Hello students, after studying this module, you shall be able to trace the development of psychoanalytical movement, learn about the primary contribution of Neo-Freudian, gain an understanding of human nature from the psychodynamic perspective, and also you will be able to learn about the methodology used in psychodynamic approach. Introduction. Psychodynamic perspective originated with the work of Sigmund Freud and dominated thinking about personality, mental disorder and psychotherapy for the first half of the 20th century. The term psychodynamics was used by Freud to describe the process of the mind as the flow of libidinal energy. Psychodynamic theory is built on the basis of mechanistic postulate that there exists a mental energy system that is governed by the physical principle of conservation of energy. The theory is deterministic and lays emphasis on the unconscious determinants of behavior, early childhood experiences and interpersonal relationship to explain human behavior and to treat people suffering from mental illness. Psychoanalysis was once the most popular domain of psychology. It could be said with certain surety that it was Sigmund Freud and the popularity of his approach that gave psychology the thrust it needed when it was emerging as a discipline. Although the Freudian theory has been criticized and many of his own disciples deflected from him, it is deeply embedded in the very evolution of psychology. Starting from the Neo-Freudian, the psychoanalytical school has evolved from classical psychoanalysis, and the contemporary notion are much different from the original Freudian specifics. Development of psychoanalytical movement. In the initial year of his practice, he used hypnosis on his patients, a method he borrowed from Jean Charcot. Working with Joseph Breuer, he developed talking cure or free association in the treatment of hysteria. The use of free association eventually led Freud to theorize about unconscious and the concept of repression. He developed dream analysis as a means of tapping into the unconscious realm. These were the beginnings of his newfound psychoanalysis. Freud engaged in self-analysis, delving into his own dream, emotions and memories. This reflection convinced him of the importance of infantile sexuality and led to the development of psychosexual stages and the concept of Oedipus complex. Then he began to develop the levels of consciousness and the structure of personality. Freud regularly delivered lectures at the University of Vienna and his ideas began to gather followers. A small group of interested physicians began to gather in his apartment every Wednesday, and this came to be known as the Wednesday Psychological Society. Among these initial followers were Wilhelm Stickel, Max Kahane, Rudolf Rittler and Alfred Adler, who later developed their own perspectives. Gradually the membership increased, but the Freud remained the society's sole patron. In 1906, Freud began correspondence with Jung, an already established psychiatrist in Erich, who had set up a similar society in Erich. Freud saw him as his crown prince, and in 1910 he was elected as the president of International Psychoanalytical Association. But Jung's thinking was markedly different from Freud, being more concerned with religion, spirituality and moral concerns. They had a bitter fallout eventually. In 1908, the society was renamed the Vienna Psychoanalytical Society. As the research became international, the first International Psychoanalytical Congress was held in April 1908. The first Journal of Psychoanalysis was launched in 1909 with Jung as its editor. Freud gave a series of lectures in the United States in 1909, which marked the spread of psychoanalytical movement to the continent. Freud remarked to Jung, who was touring with him, "They do not realize that we are bringing them the plague." The event attracted much attention and led to the founding of the American Psychoanalytical Association by James Putman in 1911. Now, Neo-Freudian psychoanalysis. The psychoanalytical tradition was carried forward by several followers of Freud, some devoid and remaining true to his classical theory, and others who initially propagated his work but later disagreed with him. Some were bothered by Freud's emphasis on the importance of sexuality and the idea that sexual issues are important even in infancy. Others raised concern about Freud's overemphasis on the unconscious process, or with the fact that he did not give enough attention to the ego. Several early members of the movement who shrewd away established their own factions. The Neo-Freudians include Alfred Adler, Melaine, Klein, Karen Horney, Otto Rank, Sandor Francis, Heinz Hartmann, Erich Fromm and Harry Sullivan among others. Some of these personalities went on to develop their own substantial theories, markedly different from Freud's and offering new insights into the human unconscious and psyche. Neo-Freudians, broadly speaking, made of the following changes in Freud's psychoanalytical view of personality. They put greater emphasis on ego functions, including ego defenses, development of the self, conscious thought process, and personal mastery. They viewed social variable as playing a greater role in shaping personality. They put less emphasis on the importance of general sexual urges or libidinal energy. They have extended personality development beyond childhood to include the entire lifespan. Carl Jung, analytical psychology. Jung believed that in the occult and mysticism and the each of the us is motivated not only by repressed experiences but also by certain emotionally toned experiences inherited from our ancestors. He introduced the concept of the collective unconscious and gave much importance to symbolism and archetype. The personality or psyche, as Jung calls it, consists of separate but interacting systems: the ego, the personal unconscious and its complexes, the collective unconscious and its archetype, the persona and the anima animus and the shadow. The self is the fully developed and unified personality. Jung's theory is a compendium of opposite. People are introverted and extroverted, rational and irrational, male, female, conscious and unconscious, and pushed by past events while being pulled by future expectations. Alfred Adler's individual psychology. Adler's theory emphasized the role of striving for superiority and the importance of caring and concerns for others. He gave much emphasis to social relationship within the family as the children grow up, and held that the position within the family is extremely important in determining how an individual deals with reality and therefore in determining the personality. Individual psychology presents an optimistic view of people while resting heavily on the notion of social interest, that is, a feeling of oneness with all humankind. It refers to the need to live in harmony with others, and Adler believed social interest is important to be a complete person. He presented a more hopeful view of man than the orthodox analysts did. Karen Horney, psychoanalytical social theory. Horney began as an orthodox Freudian but broke up with Freud over his interpretation of the female Oedipal complex. Her theory of personality emphasized the social and cultural influences rather than the biological ones in the formation of the self. Culture, especially early childhood experiences, play a leading role in shaping personality. She agreed with Freud that early childhood traumas are important, but she differed from him in her insistence that social rather than biological forces are paramount in personality development. According to her, child whose needs for love and affection have not been satisfied during childhood develop basic hostility towards their parents and as a consequence suffer from basic anxiety. Erik Fromm's Humanistic Psychoanalysis. He developed a Neo-Freudian theory that emphasizes social and cultural forces in the formation of personality. He blended insights about human nature drawn from both Freud and Karl Marx to develop an integrative theory that attempts to link personal needs, character type, societal structure, and the movement of history. The humanistic psychoanalysis assumes that humanity's separation from the natural world has produced feelings of loneliness and isolation, a condition called basic anxiety. Fromm's basic thesis is that modern day people have been torn away from their prehistoric union with nature and also with another, yet they have a power of reasoning, foresight, and imagination. This combination of lack of animal instinct and presence of rational thought make human the freaks of the universe. Self-awareness contributes to feeling of loneliness, isolation, and homelessness. To escape from these feelings, people strive to become reunited with nature and with their fellow human beings. Harry Stack's Sullivan's interpersonal theory. He believed that people develop their personality within a social context. Without other people, human would have no personality. He insisted that knowledge of the human personality can be gained only through the scientific study of interpersonal relations. He came up with an interpersonal theory of personality that focused on how people cope with anxiety. by developing a self-esteem in infancy and how they seek to overcome loneliness in later childhood through deep intimacy with friends. He emphasized the importance of various developmental stages: infancy, childhood, the juvenile era, the pre-adolescence, early adolescence, late adolescence, and adulthood. How the person's ability to establish intimacy with another person at each of these stages determine the development of the personality. Now, Erikson psychosocial theory. The stages of psychosocial development that spans the entire life vis-a-vis until adulthood, as proposed by Freud, is a model of development that gained widespread influences. These are 8 successive stages. At each stage, a specific psychosocial struggle contributes to the formation of personality. He also introduced the concept of identity and generativity into the study of personality. Erikson differed from Freud in his conceptualization of developmental stages, not only by conceiving it as a lifelong process but also placing more emphasis on both social and historical influences. Ego psychology. Anna Freud and Heinz Hartmann. Anna Freud applied psychoanalytical principle to treatment of children and expanded psychoanalytical understanding of defense mechanism. She is viewed as an ego psychologist for her relative emphasis on the adaptive power of the ego or self. Her book, The Ego and the Mechanism of Defense, published in 1936, in which she expanded and clarified the operation of the defense mechanism, is a basic work in ego psychology. Even though Freud did give an idea of defense mechanism, the credit for the full development and articulation of the topics goes to Anna Freud. Hence, Hartmann is called the father of ego psychology. He led the movement in psychoanalysis away from Freud's original emphasis on instinctual drive and towards a strengthening of ego as an adaptive and effective agent in the personality. Object relation theory. Melaine, Klein, Margaret, Mahler. The primary emphasis of object relation theory is on the personal relation rather than instinctual need, as did Freud. The object relation theories accept social and environmental factors as influences on personality. Melaine Klein is regarded as one of the primary object relation theorists, a group of theories focusing on the individual's relation to other people. The concept of object relation traces back to Freud's idea of catharsis, but it has been greatly transformed. Freud saw catharsis as the creation of psychic bond from the ego to an external object. The object relation theories focus on such bond, but only for people as objects. Klein argued that infant experiences strong feeling of love and hate towards other, which becomes the basis for the establishment of internalized object or unconscious representations of the important people in one's life. These emotionally charged objects reside within the unconscious but influence behavior in profound way. Margaret Mahler was primarily concerned with the psychological birth of the individual that take place during the first 3 years of life, a time when a child gradually surrenders security for autonomous. She delineated the process of separation or individuation during this crucial stage. She introduced the term psychological birth, which meant the child becomes an individual separate from his or her primary caregiver, an accomplishment that leads ultimately to a sense of identity. Heinz Kohut self-psychology. He emphasized the process by which the self evolves from a vague, undifferentiated image to a clear and precise sense of individual identity. His theory resembles the object relation theories, and he focused on the early mother-child relationship as the key to understanding later development. He believed that human relatedness, not innate instinctual drives, is at the core of human personality. As can be seen, these theories widened the reaches of the psychoanalytical tradition beyond Freud's original panorama and strengthened its evolution into a major school of psychology. Now, basic understanding of human nature. The psychodynamic school has offered a wide array of viewpoints regarding personality and its development. There is a lot of theoretical dissonance among various psychoanalysts, and there are differences even within Freud's own complexly constructed theories. Despite these, we can identify some salient features of the psychodynamics theory that rest upon a common basic understanding of human nature. Emphasis on the unconsciousness. A primary common assumption is that of the unconscious. Human behavior is determined not only by conscious thoughts and efforts. In fact, the major determinant of behavior and the conflicts that precipitate anxiety in our lives are beyond our consciousness. Dynamic libidinal energy system. Personality is seen as energy system, as there is an exchange and transformation of energy within the personality. This exchange of libidinal energy follows the principle of conservation of energy and forms the basis of Freud's theory. It states the total amount of energy in any given physical system is always constant. Energy quanta can be changed but not annihilated, and consequently when energy is moved from one part of the system, it must reappear in the another part. Freud borrowed the idea from Ernst Bruck, an influential contemporary. All behavior is determined by the interplay of interpsychic events. McAdams says all human behavior and experiences is determined by forces over which we have little control. These powerful forces exist within us. For the most part, it can typically be tracked back to primitive and basic issues rooted in the childhood. Anxiety and conflict. Human life and experience is written with anxiety that arises due to the constant conflict between the unconscious forces and the determinant of behavior. The viewpoint assumes a negative outlook where life is full of anxiety and misery, and humans are essentially helpless beings, have no control over the unconscious forces that renders their lives so. The only way we can help ourselves is through the method of psychoanalytical interpretation, by which we can gain at least some insight about our most pertinent unconscious issues and overcome challenges in our lives that precipitate on account of these influence of childhood experiences on development of adult personality. Psychodynamic theory gives emphasis to childhood experience in shaping up the behavior and personality of an adult. In Freudian theory, it is explicitly stated through the psychosexual stages of development. Erikson theory also gives development in stages, and the early years are conceptualized as having major influences on how development will occur throughout lifetime. Other theorists may not have been so explicit in terms of the importance of the childhood experiences, but their theories do incorporate some elements, and for instance, Adler's notion of order of birth and sibling rivalries. To summarize, according to the psychoanalytical tradition, all human beings are self-conscious, social beings wrestling with the intractable conflicts that pervade our world and inhibit our minds. Methodology. Let us now examine the methodology in classical psychoanalysis and how it led to the development of Freudian theory. Freud, based on his clinical observation and in-depth studies, was convinced that intrapsychic events played an important role in motivating behavior. These may be aware to the person or to the unconscious level. He initially used therapeutic methods like electrotherapy, then hypnotic suggestions, and later the cathartic method. He believed that every human has a cause and a purpose that can be unearthed by employing techniques like dream analysis, hypnosis, and free association. Free association is the major therapeutic process in which the patient says whatever comes to his or her mind without censoring it in any way. He believed that through his uncensored talking, the secret of unconscious would be gradually revealed. The person is encouraged to say anything aloud as thought arises in the mind, regardless of whether it is illogical, inappropriate, embarrassing, or seemingly unimportant. Freud believed that important insight could be gained about personality by analyzing the individual's dream. A major process of dream analysis is translating the manifest content of a dream into its latent or unconscious meaning. Some symbols in dream are idiosyncratic, that is, in order to understand them, you need to know about the meaning of dreamer himself attaches to those symbols. Other symbols are more universal. These techniques were initially intended by Freud as a therapeutic means to treat his patients with hysteria and neurosis. Later on, the methods came in hand of the development of his theory, since much of it had to do with the unconscious. He primarily studied mental disorder and went on to the analysis of the etiological factors. That etiological research shed light on child psychology and the laws of human growth and development. Then came a general theory of personality dynamics, then a study of human nature through the ages, and a theory that deals with the impact of society, cultures, religion, or personality. Ultimately, psychoanalysis, originally meant as a psychotherapeutic technique, became a psychological system of thought. Now, summary. The psychodynamic domain constitutes the body of theories that have evolved From and including the classical psychoanalysis of Sigmund Freud, we have traced the development of psychoanalytical movement, how it began with a few members and grew into an international association, eventually spreading to the US. The followers of Freud and the Neo-Freudian dealt with their disagreements with Freud by recasting his ideas into their own words and also widening the breadth of the school, thereby collectively instituting the psychodynamic approach. The psychodynamic approach, although comprising of several different theories with quite different ways of conceptualizing the human psyche, has some common basic assumptions and postulates by virtue of which they belong to a psychodynamic school. These includes the emphasis on the unconscious, the deterministic view of human behavior, the dynamic libidinal energy system, the conflict and the tension between the unconscious forces that manifest in the behavioral system, and the anxiety resulting from these tensions and the influences of child experiences in the development of the adult person. The methodology used in the psychodynamic approach is purely qualitative and mostly involves extensive case studies. The subjectivity and lack of empirical evidence inherent in his methodology has been subject to much criticism. The main goal of the qualitative method is to identify underlying meaning of behavior by identifying recurrent themes, ideas, symbolism. The techniques of free association and dream analysis were used by Freud to achieve the goal of gaining insight into the unconscious motive and determinants of the individual's behavior. That's all for this module. Thank you.